This is Ashley Newby, and you're listening to the Black Studies Podcast, a Mellon Grant sponsored series of conversations examining the history of the field. Our conversations engage with a wide range of activists and scholars, senior figures in the field, late doctoral students, cultural workers, political organizers, and everyone in between in order to explore the cultural and political meaning of Black studies as an area of inquiry and its critical methods. On today's episode of the Black Studies Podcast, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jeanine Staples-Dixon, Professor of Literacy and Language, African American Studies, and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Penn State's Colleges of Education and Liberal Arts. She also serves as Senior Faculty Mentor for the university through the Office of Educational Equity. A longtime leader in critical new literacy studies and teacher education, she's currently writing her two forthcoming books, Extraordinary Pedagogies, an Endarkened Feminist Approach to Revolutionizing Teacher Consciousness, and Extraordinary Literacies Regarding the Literate Lives of Black Girls and Women in Schools in Society. She teaches LLED 580, CI 590, and CI 501 for Penn State's World Campus. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Studies Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jeanine Staples-Dixon, Professor of Language and Literacy, African American Studies, and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Penn State's Colleges of Education and Liberal Arts. How are you doing today, Dr. Staples-Dixon?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to be able to talk to you. So we can dive right in. How did you get interested in doing the work of Black Studies, and what keeps you committed to that type of work?
Well, I started out, and I am still pretty solidly rooted in the field of education. And so when I was studying for my degree, I was thinking a lot about the trajectories of teaching and learning and how people come to know information, pass it along, disseminate it, apply it, alternatively generate it. And I realized that any of those processes, to be deeply understood, need to be racialized and gendered. It needs to be clearly rooted in a framework that understands faceted identities. And so as I moved forward in the field of education, I sort of named myself and evolved my research agenda to be interdisciplinary. So I sought out permanent and formal affiliations with liberal arts in African American Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies so that I could be really grounded with colleagues who are thinking about Black studies, who are thinking about AFAM, who are thinking about Lit Crit, who are thinking about queering methodologies, so that I could really be a stronger pedagogue. So I would say that my entree to the field of Black studies really started at the beginning of my work in the professorate when I was an early career scholar, an assistant professor.
Okay, thank you. So building on that, you are primarily in education. That is where your degrees are in. But how do you see the work that you're doing as you spoke to the intersectionality or the interdisciplinary nature of your work? How do you see yourself as situated in relationship to the multiple fields and disciplines that your work does cross?
I see myself situated really as a translator by effect. I think about the ways that, my inquiries are constantly about how the field of education can develop pedagogies that are endarkened, that are mandatory, that are constructivist, that are colonizing. And so I see that need and that focus and also those ideas into Black studies. And then I sort of stay in the gap and think about how scholars of Black studies, I name myself as one, can speak back to education and speak back to teacher education, teacher preparation, curriculum development, counselor education. And so I think I see myself as an intermediary, a person who does translation between both fields.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask particularly about pedagogy and how you approach pedagogy, because you do have so much amazing work in that area.
Thank you.
So how do you see the work that you do pedagogically as being informed by the history and the ideas rooted in the field of Black studies.
Are you asking how my pedagogy is informed by Black studies, or are you asking how I use pedagogy to inform Black studies?
Both.
Okay. Um, so, pedagogical framing, apart from a very small group of scholars, has been whitewashed for many generations. Because we are situated in the West, the United States of America is deeply racist and sexist and phobic in multiple ways. Anything pertaining to educating the citizenry, like teaching learning frameworks, has been deeply whitewashed. And so when I came into the field and named myself as a person who thinks about pedagogies and wants to understand epistemologies and ontologies that inform pedagogies, I knew that I had to racialize the term. I knew that I needed to contribute racial frameworks, critical consciousness, and critical race studies and critical gender studies to understand how to inform pedagogical development. So really, it's about informing the frames. It's about asking questions of the frames. If we are going to say, for example, talk about AI pedagogy, if we're talking about constructivist pedagogy, if we're talking even about liberatory and anticipatory or critical pedagogy, we constantly need to be asking, how does whiteness bear effect in this framework, and how could Blackness liberate and emancipate this framework? What does Blackness as a construct, as a concept that is political, social, cultural, emotional, and spiritual bring to bear on this field, and all of the different facets that are evolved from the field? So really, it's about me asking questions of the term. It's asking questions of the frames, and really being in the pursuit of responses that illuminate the genius of Blackness, and the possibilities that Blackness bring to pedagogy. What I say about, the pedagogies I'm thinking about often, it's extraordinary pedagogies, the title of my latest book. I'm thinking often about how can Blackness sort of blow things up? How can Blackness break things apart? And I moved from that space, not to be catastrophic, but I moved from that space because I take for granted that a white supremacist patriarchal ideology has constructed pedagogical frames in ways that are reductionist, shallow, superficial, and in many ways wasteful and even dehumanizing. So I think about how Blackness can actually deconstruct and decolonize and then reconstruct in ways that are affirming.
Can you provide an example of what that looks like in your classrooms?
Sure. So I think about my undergrads right now. We're thinking about constructivist pedagogy a lot. We're thinking about a constructivist epistemology. So we're studying, the old white men who constructed that pedagogy in the early 1900s and why they constructed that pedagogy. It was really to, at first blush, to think about how human beings are meaning makers and develop knowledge. And so the constructivist ideal is all about supporting the teacher and understanding the learner as agentic, as a person who brings something to the classroom. So it has these really lovely ideals. But what I will say to actually sort of deconstruct that seemingly very sweet and effective pedagogy is I add Blackness to it. And a Blackness is always asking about the undercurrent. It's asking about the unseen. It's asking about the shadows, what is not spoken and yet still very much alive. So I say, well, if constructivist pedagogy was developed by Bruner and Piaget because, they profess to affirm the learner as agentic, why would they do that in the context of the United States of America? If we look really deeply, it's because they wanted to create workers. They wanted to serve a capitalist socioeconomic engine that needed brawn, that needed bodies, that needed commitments of time and energy. So it's not as endearing or affirming as one might think. If you add a Black frame and you darken your lenses, you can actually see where there are duplicitous and self-serving impulses under the surface. So what I do with my undergraduates is I posit the questions, like always ask what's not being spoken. Always ask something about the context of this classroom or this school or this pedagogical frame. Ask about the historical moment. Ask about the people who were in power when this pedagogy was being developed. Ask about the people who were not in power. Are they the same people today as they were back then? Isn't that interesting? Let's ask questions about that. And so when I say I'm bringing Blackness to pedagogical frames, that's what I mean. It's really asking questions. It's asking about the undercurrent. It's illuminating the shadows. It's going into the caves and the nooks and crannies, and doing so incredible wisdom, incredible treasure that can set us up for futures if we pay attention.
Thank you. Prior to that, just the last response, you did mention your latest book, Extraordinary Pedagogies. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that and maybe how that is helping to do some of that deconstructivist and decolonizing work and thinking about what we do in classrooms?
Sure. The book is really about the curriculum model that I developed at Penn State over the last 15 years. It provides a framework, a sort of a step-by-step process of the theories, the methodologies, and the tools, the assignments, the assessments that I've used to decolonize the souls of white pre-service teachers predominantly who have taken my class. And the decolonizing process is about supporting students who are interested in K-12 education with frameworks that lean into the extraordinary, and the extraordinary has to do with socio-emotional, socio-spiritual frameworks that support our understanding of what teaching and what learning really are about, beyond the cognitive and beyond the material. So, in the project, one might find ideas about spirituality, about emotionality, about ways of being, ontological frameworks. There's quite a bit in the book about white supremacist patriarchal ideology. It's really developing an understanding for how to do really profound and meaningful and significant work in a very short period of time. It's a part of what makes the pedagogy extraordinary. A lot of people ask, well, how can you do a decolonizing process in 2 weeks? The model is based on a 2-week intensive immersion course. People talk about being, needing 2 years or 20 years to actually sort of break the seduction of white supremacy in the consciousness of mainly white pre-service teachers. And I say, well, I can do it in 2 weeks. And the way that I can do it, and I have done it, is by following the frames in the book, the pedagogical frames in the book.
Thank you. That's quite extraordinary, as you said.
Thank you.
So, building on that, did you want to say anything about your next book, The Extraordinary Literacies?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm writing it right now. The thing that sets that book apart is that it's really about the wisdom, the epistemological and ontological wisdom that I've gleaned from engagements with Black girls and women over time. We have extraordinarily literate lives. We have engagements with the ethereal, with spiritual, immaterial logics that empower us and allow us to supersede our encounters with white supremacist patriarchal ideology in schools and society. And we do it over and over and over again, across generations, across diasporic boundaries, across denominations, across age, uh, in really phenomenal ways. And so the book is really a collection of essays that speak to really powerful questions that often plague people um, who are racialized and gendered in a particular way. I'm thinking about the questions, the issues that a lot of girls and women deal with. It's issues around self-worth, for example,
Mhm.
issues around boundaries, issues around voice and voicelessness, issues around visibility or invisibility or erasure. And so I focus on those sorts of plagues that are really a result, almost unilaterally, um, a result of encounters with white supremacy and patriarchy. And I provide meaningful responses within each essay for how extraordinary literacies can support the evolution and the healing from some of those plagues. And they all come from Black women.
Thank you. I was very struck by the fact that it was focused on Black girls and women. I know that there is an increasingly growing field on thinking about Black girlhood and Black girl literacies in the ways in which Black women, but also Black girls, are
Mhm.
able to navigate these spaces. And so I know that this book will definitely be a wonderful contribution to that growing field as well.
Thank you.
You mentioned both in talking about how you situate yourself in relationship to disciplines and your forthcoming book um, about the role of questions, right? And the questions are what bring you to doing the type of work that you do and the necessity of the interdisciplinary nature of that. Um, I'm curious as to whether there are elements of Black studies, the past of Black studies, perhaps, that drive some of the questions that you're asking now.
Hmm. I love the canonical literary work of an Alice Walker. I love the ways that narrative and story, creative narrative story, that has been informed by our sociocultural and sociohistorical moments in the evolution of Black girlhood and Black womanhood have just been marked by those texts and by those authors. They absolutely inform my understanding of questions and how we can ask questions about our bodies, abilities, questions about time and space. I mean, I love Octavia Butler's contributions through prose and poetry and sci-fi and Afrofuturism, all of the ways that Black girls and women have created texts and canons that present novel ideas and inquiries through incredible characters and situations that are very specific to Black girls and Black womanhood have taught me a lot about inquiry. They've taught me a lot about what it means to ask endarkened questions. Again, questions that have cosmological value. I think a lot about, just as a scholar and as a coach, I don't coach positive affirmations. I know that they're very popular. I don't shy away from them because I don't believe in them. I think they work. My concern is that positive affirmations are often taught in the learning trajectory at the wrong time. If you teach positive affirmations when a person is beginning to heal from the trauma of their encounters with white supremacist patriarchal ideology, and they're at the onset of that learning trajectory, positive affirmations actually uh, function as a detriment. They actually do more harm than good, mainly because the fragmented dysmorphically parts of that person are inflamed and are not available to those positive affirmations. They're not available to receive at all. They could be available later in the trajectory, but at first, there's no availability. And so what will end up happening is, if you teach a girl or a young woman or an older woman to say positive affirmations over and over and over again to herself out loud, or looking at herself in the mirror, or writing them down in a journal, it will feel like force feeding, and it will feel disingenuous. It will not ring true. And the inflammatory energy in her will push back against those declarations in a way that will actually hurt more than the original trigger that she was managing. So instead, I focus on positive affirmations, IR, instead of OR. And they're based in inquiry, they're based in questions. And so it would look like asking yourself, why am I so easy to love?
Mm.
It's a different positionality to take towards yourself. Why am I so full of light? Why am I so deeply accompanied in all of my words, thoughts, and deeds? That why framework, that inquiry stance that you have towards yourself and that you can present towards yourself will actually prompt those same inflamed, fragmented, dysnormal parts of you to begin the search to respond to that inquiry, so that you actually circumvent your impulse to fight or compete with a statement that you don't really believe about yourself. Not right now. So it's just one example of how learning from all those great scholars in Black studies, all those great beautiful Black women, how to ask really helpful questions, and more complex and simple, just a great array of questions you can ask of yourself, of a text, of other human beings, of the world around you, is an incredible saving grace in our process of epistemological and ontological build.
Thank you. I'm gonna be thinking about that why framework and that having that inquiry stance for a long time. I hadn't thought about that period. Like what it is like to try to do affirmations when you don't necessarily believe
Yeah.
what it's saying yet.
Mhm.
But rather trying to look for, okay, here are the reasons
Mhm.
why this is true. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
So, my last main question for you is, particularly given the moment that we're in, right? What interests and excites you most about the future of Black studies, broadly defined? And maybe what questions should we be asking in Black studies and where should we be going?
I really love what Tricia Hersey is bringing to bear on the field right now. She's talking so much about rest, but it's not just rest. She's talking about Black apathy and she's talking about escape. She's talking about trickster energy. So we are now experiencing, in our sociocultural and our sociopolitical moment, we are experiencing a really sharp and decided rise in a white supremacist patriarchal ideology. Of course, we know it's the swing back against the Obama era. We knew that the pendulum would swing back. We knew, those of us in Black studies who think about AFAM, who think about gender, who think about ideology, we knew it was going to be bad. And it's just as bad as we thought it would be. And it's going to get worse. So what I think, before it gets better, I'll be hopeful. But I think about Ta-Nehisi Coates does this work as well as Tricia Hersey, thinking about how to learn from our ancestral lineage about what it means to go into a cloaked energy, an energy that is rooted in Black collectivism, that is rooted in solidarity, that is rooted also, though, in trickster energy, that is rooted in escape, whereby we are learning how to be in the world but not of it, learning how to access spiritual frames, imperial flames, somatic frames that connect us deeply to other worlds. I'm talking about the cosmology of the ancients. I'm talking about worship. I'm talking about prayer. I'm talking about ancient studies. I'm talking about indigenous studies. I'm talking about going back to the places that whiteness could not ever touch and did not ever know existed. We need to go back into those spaces and edify ourselves in those histories, and actualize them, concretize them, materialize them now for ourselves and also for future generations. It could take another 25 to 45 years to come back from where we are now in just 9 months of the current regime. The coup has been complete. The government it's been taken over. So we're going to not only need to edify ourselves in darkened epistemologies, but we're going to need to do that for our children and our children's children. so that we can survive whiteness. Whiteness and white supremacist patriarchal ideology is the root of all human suffering. It is the thing that will take out humanity. Um, and will be up, as usual, it will be up to Black women to be in leadership around how to do a covert healing operation in Black collectivism as we move forward from there.
Well, thank you. I think that, one, highlighting the importance of cloaked energy and the undarkened pedagogies, that's super important. And it has been very much a thing I've seen a lot more lately, right? I think a lot of people, particularly, I mean, I'm mostly in academic spaces, but there's been a lot of that among Black women in academic spaces, and I think it is necessary. I also find 25 to 45 years, that gives me some hope. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it does. I'm being yeah, I actually think it might take longer, but I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can. It's not my strong suit. It is not, but I'm working on it.
I mean, I think that even the idea that we can come back from it is a hope that we can hold on to.
Yeah.
In the midst of everything that is going on. So that's super helpful. Is there anything you would like to add or end on before I give you back the rest of your day?
Well, I just want to say I'm so grateful for this invitation. I'm so happy to be here with you. This conversation has been wonderful. I encourage myself, I encourage all of us to just read Blackness. We get to go back. We go back into our archives. We go to Moreland Spingarn at Howard University, my alma mater. We go to the spaces that are housing the work of Black studies scholars and educators and pedagogues, and we get to read and converse in real time. I believe that we need to come offline. I think we need to go analog. I think we need to go into each other's homes. I think we need to be in constant contact and touch, and be reading the works of our ancestors and speaking the works and words of our ancestors and contributing to the works of our ancestors as we move forward.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful note to end on. And again, something that has been increasingly helpful is the going back and being in conversation with our ancestors and the works that have already been done.
That's right.
These works they're living works, and we have them to go back to, and we definitely need to in these moments. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great one. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.